It was the love that those kind of people had for training. How did you earn your respect? You had to train hard. Put yourself in opportunist places that elevate you. And that means you have to step away from the phone and the computer and do this. You gotta go get your ass kicked. If you want to get depressed, just start staring at your phone and do nothing. It's probably common for kids to go home and just scroll through a phone for 4 hours. Where will you feel productive? You're just consuming. You want to produce and create, and that's what gets you feeling good.
Time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. My guest today is Zach Even-Esh again. I highly suggest you check out episode 162. I think we spent 4 hours on that one because we went through your whole history and everything in there. So we'll get into some more nuanced topics and some funner topics throughout this because I don't have to introduce. You've been doing this shit since 2003.
Yeah.
You know, so we are trying to show the history of, what is that? Forever ago.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the math.
But it seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
That's all like when I came in speaking to Rhonda, I was like, she's like, are you going to the Arnold? I go, you know what I remember about the Arnold is the first time I ever went, I was hanging out with you and Jim. You guys got me into the WPO.
Mm-hmm.
That was like their last, I don't know how it is now, but that was like the last drug tested or non-drug tested. And I was like, what the hell is this? And you were like, Zach, like you like, look, oh, these guys are deadlifting. This is your lift. I mean, I think Andy Bolton pulled over 1,000. Chuck, I remember, was still competing. Louis, I was speaking with Louis, and while I was speaking with Louis, some kid was texting me. I had a flip phone. He's texting me that he made it into the state finals, and I'm explaining to Louis, hey man, all those phone calls with you, I took everything and learned it. So yeah, like 20 plus years.
So you've been coaching and writing and podcasting for about that whole time.
Yeah, like I think about writing. I started with like writing on my own website. It wasn't even called a blog. You're just writing articles. Then you guys had articles, and we spoke about this last time. For you to host or whatever we called it, to post content on your website costed you money. And I always say like we looked at information so differently because if I wanted to email somebody, I couldn't. It was just hard to find somebody's email. You had to pick up the phone and you know, speaking of like, I'd speak with you, I'd speak with Jim, I'd speak with Louis, and you felt like, hey, these guys just gave me their time. And I didn't look at it like, oh, I spoke on the phone with Dave for 30 minutes. I said, I just spoke with Dave for 30 minutes, but it was decades of his, you know, blood, sweat, tears to give me those 30 minutes. And I think now, as much as we do these podcasts and everything is free, it has devalued. The people don't value it because you're not fighting to get that information. And so I know people think, hey, that's like an old way of thinking. But to me, I really respect what somebody had to go through to share that content. I don't look at it like, oh, he wrote an article, it took him an hour. No, it was decades of work that he's trying to consolidate in there. And so I think that's a concern I have in the world is like, hey guys, you got all this information, but you don't really know the value behind it. It's a little hard almost. Another
side of that is, and a lot of people listening probably won't know because they haven't been around that long, is before the internet. You know, I mean, the internet was around before we knew it was around, but before we all knew it was around, the only way you were going to get information was from magazines or if you knew somebody or traveling to a gym.
Yes.
And so if we look at gatekeepers of information, the gatekeepers of the information, just the written word, were whoever the editors of the magazine were, and you better hope to hell that you have some way in for that.
Yes.
Because if you just sent it in, it probably wasn't going to get published because most of them were probably ghostwritten, anyhow.
I got
you. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So then when you go from that to things starting to come online, there's still gatekeeping, of the different websites for all that. And if we fast forward now, there's no gatekeepers.
Correct.
Which can be a good thing, because how many voices, if we were to go way back, were never heard, that were amazing at what they did, probably way better than the people that were actually talking about it.
Agreed.
You know, so it's I guess the responsibility of gatekeeping is shifted from publishers and editors to the individual. So they need to take that responsibility a little bit more seriously on how they vet, you know, the information that they're looking at, because there's so much.
And I could certainly say I look back at like my writing and the information I shared, and I'm like, oh, it just sounds like shit. It looked like shit. But hopefully people understand when they look at some of that older stuff, oh, that's where they were. That's the understanding they had to kind of share that information. And you're right, like waiting to hear from somebody, I think also kept us on our toes, and you wanted to test it on yourself. Or you're talking about like, all right, I'm going to learn, I'm going to visit this gym. You know, like I remember it was like weird at first when people were like, can I stop by and watch what you do? And I was like, you could stop by, but you're not going to watch. You're going to train. That's really the best way for you to learn. Otherwise, you'll never understand. You know, you could look at a program on paper and you could say, man, it kind of looks like not so good. Then you do it and you work it and you're like, oh shit, that's why. You know, that's why it was programmed in such a way. Now I could feel it. Now I could understand that. And that's kind of how I modeled our internship program for strength coaches. Is I remember Louis always saying, or you may have said it, you guys would say, like, when you would come to Westside, it was frowned upon to just watch and like sit in a corner and watch, because everybody was like, you know, what kind of coach are you? You're not going to lift. How do you learn? And so people will be like, that's my back, my this, my that. That's the best time to train, because now you got to learn to train somebody else who has a messed up back or a broken hand or 6 months post ACL. So our interns will train with the different kind of populations we'll have. You'll train with a high school kid. You'll train with a college kid. Then you'll train with somebody on their first time, an intro workout. And to me, that doing is the best. Today we have a lot of people like writing stuff, or they just kind of cut and paste stuff. You must do. I mean, this is, I'm talking to the choir, but we were talking earlier about, you know, being here. And I have that little book, and you wrote Under the Bar, and I remember you sent it to me first as a PDF. And I was like, Dave, like I fucking cannot stand like looking at the computer or whatever to read it. But I remember I couldn't stop reading. I was like, dude, every lifter and every like teen athlete, they need that book. Like the stories. The story I always remember was like the guy that took a day off from work to take you to a powerlifting meet, but didn't say like, what was this? There was the story of like, he didn't say he had to like not go to work and maybe he didn't like get paid for the day, and
he just took it off. I mean, I was training for my first meet, you know, with a small crew, and the person that was supposed to take me bailed, you know, the day before, you know, so I just called a couple of the other guys, and no questions asked. He was a police officer. He called off his shift, you know, and it's a whole day. I mean, we're leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning because we had to go from Findlay, Ohio to Cleveland, you know, so 3-hour trip. Then this was before we had flights, and it was just, I guess, like round robin. So the bar just increased all the way up. So it was a longer meet. Got home maybe around midnight. He didn't have to do that.
That's right.
You know, but I put the time in for training for it. And being my first meet, if I didn't do it, you know, I probably just would have done another one. You know, so in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think it was the love that those kind of people had for training, and how did you earn your respect? You had to train fucking hard. I always talk about that in my younger years, going to all these gyms, my goal, being a kind of this like insecure kid, was I wanted to earn the respect of the strongest guys in the gym, because when you're 15, that boosts your self-respect. So what did I kind of internally say to myself? Work hard, let them see you working hard, get them to spot you. You know, I was training incorrectly, but I was just trying to put in effort, and I learned that people liked other people who were working hard. They watched you, and they were like, if this kid works hard and we see him for several months, okay, we'll kind of let him
then
into
we'll
our
help.
then we'll help. Otherwise, you're another come and go. You're like everybody else. What about the story? It's like a little like fuzzy in my head, where the guy, like, was he mad at you and he threw your cowboy boots out into the street?
I was trying to pull 500 or whatever it was, and I missed it, and I got fucking pissed, and probably tried to do it at least 17 more times over the next 5 minutes. Unsuccessfully every single time. And the whole time it's probably the same guy, and I'm thinking about it. The whole time, he's trying to get me to stop. I'm like, fuck off, I can do this. And I've done it before. And threw my boots in the middle of the fucking it was it's a small town, but it was still a busy street.
Right.
And it made me stop. Right. I'm like, what the fuck you just do? Because at that time, I didn't have sneakers. I had I had wrestling shoes, cowboy boots, and whatever shoes that I lifted it. That was it. It's just how I lived my life up to that point. So it wasn't just my boots. It was like my fucking shoes, man. Like those, I don't have those. I don't have anything to walk home in. And the same thing with that guy that took me to that first meet. I would have drove, but I was 13. So it puts more, I'm a kid, so it puts more perspective into the whole thing.
The time that people would put into you, that was to me the special.
But you had to earn it, something that you said there, because he wouldn't have done that if I just was a slap dick going in the gym, not training hard. Probably wouldn't have done it if I didn't do that stupid shit beforehand, because he's seeing the passion.
But he saw, he saw something in you. And then I guess looking back now, we're quote unquote older. You look back and you tend to want to help people that were showing what you had. You're like, I can relate to that. I see the passion and the fire. And I tell athletes today, I go, listen, I love everybody, but I love you more when you work hard. If I got to keep chasing you to work hard, I still love you, but I always love the kids that work harder. I tell them outright. Then I also try to remind myself, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was dumb and not as coachable. So I always try to look at both sides. But I think what's harder today, if, I don't go to a gym, I have my own gym, but sometimes I'll go into a local gym, I'll get like a protein shake, and everybody's disconnected. And I think that takes away such the purity of the experience. There's a lot of experiences you could have, but even if you're my training partner, I'll see kids train together, they're technically not, because they both got their headphones or AirPods in, and you're in your own world. I always felt like the beauty was finally somebody like recognizing your work, and then they start to talk to you. So you develop these friendships. Then the biggest, strongest guy starts to mentor you. Well, that can't happen in a gym, even though, and I'm sure you're setting up some of these like new age type gyms, Dave. They're like a 24/7 gym with powerlifting. Okay, there's powerlifting there, but everybody's still kind of doing their thing. They're in there with their own music. There was also a lot of beauty in learning how to train hard with like fucking Mariah Carey coming on during the holidays. You're like ready for your last set of squats, and then you're like, fuck, Mariah Carey's on. You got to do it. But you now have all the advantages of, let me put on my favorite song. Let me get psyched. I try to tell athletes, you actually want some kind of shitty music, because you're going to play football, you're going to go to an away game, and the crowd is going to start taunting you. They're going to yell obscenities about your family, your girlfriend. But you've been training in your perfect environment. You only lift hard when your song comes on. And I think it's like, you need those imperfections to prepare you for when shit hits the fan, whether it's sports or life. And so fun, I get older, I'm like, I don't want the good music. I want the worst song before I'm about to do my heaviest lift, because there's power in that.
Well, you also learn how to communicate with others, because there may be that group that you want to train with, so you're trying to earn the respect to get into that group, but then you still need to kind of find a way to befriend the weirdo, because you might need a spot You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And, you know, so you're navigating all these different personalities,
Yes.
you know, to be able to help yourself get better while at the same time trying to help them get better. And I'm more optimistic than pessimistic because I think the more digital everything becomes, you know, with AI doing what it's doing and what it's going to do, it's going to make us all even more digital to where there's going to be a tipping point where people are going to crave being social.
Human connection.
And that will happen in bars, restaurants, gyms, right? So every change that we've seen, because we've been around for a long time, they weren't like that. We can look back and say, oh shit, I kind of see what happened when it went from the magazines into the computer, then then to blogs, and then when it went into social media. You see these little, they're giant tipping points when you look back, but they were fluid, you know, and I think we're going to see that again because the separation is only going to go so far until there's going to be a point where it's like, I'm going fucking crazy, you know, because all I'm doing is talking to people through a screen or texting or whatever it is. I need to actually fucking talk to somebody.
You literally go crazy.
Yeah.
I, last year, or actually this fall, I was in a nice little town. Daughter had a tennis tournament there, and I was walking through the downtown, and they had a gym, like a, you know, fitness type gym, and there was like people exercising, but there was no coach. They were following a follow along TV monitor, and I thought that's interesting. Now, what's the positive of that? It's convenient. People are tending to like, they don't, I don't want to say they don't care, but they're like, hey, I'm getting coached. They're not like, I need to have a person here. I think all the Zoom stuff during COVID, people got used to they started attaching kind of similar value to, you're coaching me online is no different than you coaching me in person. But, you know, then on the flip side, what you're saying, people crave that human connection. People crave what once was. Think about like how many people are now like posting content. For example, I purchased a Powerlifting USA from 1979. There's like massive Instagram accounts that only post stuff from decades ago. Like it's almost like people are like, oh, I love that older stuff. So I think there'll always be people that are okay with all digital, and then there's going to be people that want to blend, and then there's going to be the people that, like you're saying, hey, I want to be around people. I want to build. I want to feel that, you know, togetherness, which is actually what I've been trying very hard to do with my gym, because we're in a small town, is I want it to feel like old town Little League Baseball. Whereas now, Little League Baseball is essentially gets dismantled by the time kids are in middle school. They got to go to travel leagues, baseball, and they're going all over the place. What about when you used to have that awesome team in your town where you grew up together? That's what I'm trying to turn the underground into, like a community connection place.
How? Because now we're getting into a culture question.
Yeah.
Right? Because you got to build a culture to be able to do that.
Sure.
Because if it's just a come in, train, go, like a lot of places are, then you need to become very good at marketing because you're going to have fast turnaround times.
No doubt.
So how do you go about ingraining that culture? Granted, you've been doing it for a long time, so there's a lot of organically ingraining in there. But when you bring new people in, new coaches in, you know, how do you go about that?
New coaches, new people. What's tricky about that kind of the culture is, somebody asked Nate, so I was telling you, hey man, I took myself off the coaching floor, which is actually stressful for me to not be amongst the weights. You know, we always said that. And kids, somebody had asked him, you know, what do kids stay after? And he said no, because they got like 20 other things to do. Whereas, remember my first location, it was very common for people to stay at least 15 minutes more to train, bullshit, hang out. And then it would be also, I'm staying 30 minutes. Or, hey, I did the workout, the training here. I'm going to get these 3 guys and we're going to put our own training program together. And they started doing that. Now they got the next thing to go. They're rushing around. Travel teams and all these club sports has really taken over. It's kind of like, I don't know if the word is infiltrated or kind of intercepted that home old 80s vibe. And so that's what I am trying to bring back is you can ride your bike if you live in our town to the underground, and we're trying to get that home feel. The problem we run into is everybody's on the run, whereas people used to stay extra. Now it's not odd for them to have to leave early or they show up a little bit late. So let's say you play baseball or basketball. All right, I just finished training at the underground. I got to go home. I got to eat quick because then I got to go to my basketball thing, or I got my baseball training. Baseball is all year round. Basketball is all year round. We could get into, is that the best thing for the kids? No. But I tell you what's good for people in general is getting together with other people and struggling together.
This episode of Table Talk is brought to you by Troponin Supplements, a company that's changing the game when it comes to performance supplements. Today, I want to talk to you about the 3 supplements that I like best. ATP is your go-to supplement when you need fast, clean energy and sharp mental focus without the crash. It gives me that focus and the energy that I'm looking for and doesn't have the crash at the end like you find with a lot of other supplements that are out there. Next up is Field Rations, which is my go-to intra-workout. It's no stim, but it provides all the nutrients to allow for better recovery and better stamina, so to say. And then there's Suppressor Max. This is for anyone that loves carbs but wants to be able to handle them a little bit better. It helps your body use carbs more efficiently, keeps blood sugar steady, and gives you better energy after meals without that sugar crash. Head over to Troponin Supplements and use the code TABLETALK for 10% off your order.
What I've changed at the underground is adding an adult element, which I should have done way back in the day. I was always like, nope, we don't do that. But then I'm 49. I got 2 kids, 18 and 16. And you know how much I would love if I was near here and I could come and meet up with you and a bunch of guys in the morning or at this certain time. It's a very special thing. So that's what we've done. We created a morning group at 5:45, train until 6:30 for all the people that got to zip out to work. Then we have an 8:30 group, which is like you've dropped off your kids at school, you work from home, or you have flexibility in your work schedule, you could come. And what we're trying to do is, now that I'm more level-headed in my thinking, is the training is challenging, but we're not like kicking your ass so bad that you're afraid to show up or you're so beat up that you can't come back. So I'm trying to build more of a community within the gym and meet people where they're at.
Now, isn't that
this whole world?
Isn't that demographic going to be? I mean, kids have a vastly different demographic, but if you're dealing with a certain age, I mean, outside of obesity, which probably most of them are, they're kind of the same demographic. But now when you're dealing with adults, you can be dealing with somebody that's 21 to 78.
I don't market to the 20s and 30s. Yeah. I look at like parents or you're like over 40. So like moms who lift, strong dads who I now that I'm in their shoes, or I'm older than some of these parents, I'll tell you what I've noticed about men is men will, they'll take care of their family. They'll pay for their sons' baseball, their daughter's basketball, soccer, all this stuff. But then when it comes to taking care of themselves, they feel guilty. And I've just tried to speak to them on that level is the best thing you could do is get yourself strong and feel healthy and take care of yourself. Because if not, you start to resent that you're not doing anything for yourself. You're just working and then you're on that runaround for sports.
Is it guilty or exhausted?
I think it's a little both. I think you're as a dad, you feel both, and then you feel you're like, well, fuck it, I'm already so far down the road, I can't get fit again, and I'll just eat like shit. And so you got to meet them where they're at, which means catch them in the morning before other people start waking up. And also what we did is, because our last group of the day at 6 p.m. tends to be a little slower, we made it hybrid. So if a dad is bringing his son and wants to come in and train, you're on a different workout, obviously, you're there. And those are special times because my kids grew up in this first gym that I built. And so my kids are 16 and 18. I've had this location for 12 years. So they grew up in there. they saw me training, they saw the kids training, it became normal. But back to that specific question, are you exhausted and feeling guilty? I think there's a lot of such emotional stress, as you know, as a dad, you're the person providing money, you just put the stress on yourself. And then if I look at them, and for example, you had Brett Contreras on this. I say this a lot. You know, when I talk to friends, like you have my buddies here, Joe and Dan from Varsity House Gym. When you talk to them about marketing their business, most of them target women only, because men, we're not quote unquote normal. We still want to be strong. We want that like feeling. It's something that like, you know, you'd have to kill us to stop us from training. But look at Brett Contreras. It's all women. Brett is, I always say, people don't remember, who didn't know Brett when he was younger. Brett was a meathead, essentially, who was in the research of like the hip thrust and whatnot on how it improved sports performance, like vertical jump. Then women are like, I like that. That builds my butt. I always say, what's the more starving crowd in business, women or men? Women always, I don't want to say always, they have more of that. They worry about how people view them physically. They want to take care of themselves. Men will suffer and just be like, I'll work, I'll take care of the family, I'll do the runaround. And so I just openly said in my social media stuff, stop feeling guilty for taking care of yourself. The best thing you could do as a father and as a husband and as a family man is to get stronger and be healthy, because now you're going to have energy throughout your day. You're going to feel revitalized. Even though I knew that wasn't the best quote unquote business model, I felt that I wanted to help other men, because my kind of online world now is a lot of adult men who are in these kind of middle age years, or the kids are older. And so I was just speaking their language, and we try to do, they train, then they hang out a little bit afterwards. A lot of men stop hanging out. John Wellborn said this. I'm going to paraphrase it. I don't have it correct, but the like men in their middle-aged years, the suicide rates were going up, and he had read about that. It was like they stop having basically a brotherhood. They don't engage with other people. They just work and then provide for family. And I think then they start to feel stress and emptiness. Well, men now start going to jiu-jitsu. That's their new friends. Men start joining a gym, and I'm basically modeling it, Dave, of like an old style strength training club. And that's exciting for them, you know?
Well, they're also going to find, and I'm sure you've experienced this just through your ebbs and flows of just your own training, is you get super busy, then certain things don't get done, and you're fatigued, and you're like, fuck it, I got to get all this other shit done. And then after a few weeks, you're in that mental spiral, It's
bad.
And you know that if you just trained, you would have more energy.
Oh, yeah.
We know that. So we know we just got to find a way to kickstart this again. And then all the energy comes back, and I can knock this shit out way easier. A lot of guys don't know that because they've never trained.
Correct.
So they have that stress, and they have that fatigue and all those other things. And the last thing that they're going to think about when they're just crashed at the end of the day, worried about all of this shit, is I should probably exercise when they're completely already shot, because their answer is going to be, well, if I exercise, I'm going to be even more tired, then I'm not going to be able to be present,
Yeah,
and it's the opposite effect.
Correct. I feel like I made a mistake of thinking there's all this content out. It's free, it's easy, but we know what to look for. I'm still not exactly sure what like a middle-aged man or woman come across when they do a Google search. What is the top search result? And so a lot of men will, in their late 30s, early 40s, the last time they did strength training was with their high school sport team. And who knows what that even looked like. So then they try to do that and replicate what they did at age 16, which doesn't work when you're 40 something. And so also they'll do like a set, kind of sit around. We do like a basic bodybuilding superset. And that's exactly what they need. Some easy strength, some supersets. I also knew that they would be worried about time. So I consolidated workouts to 45 minutes. I was even tempted to offer 30 minutes, but you're right. Like, to me, I would say it's iron therapy. You want to feel better? I always say, do sleds, carries, and calisthenics for 15 minutes. You will feel 100 times better. But then you're like, oh man, I feel good. I'm going to start squatting now. And men just need the guidance. And so I try to listen to everything they say and kind of make a mental note. So we hear things like, I don't know what to do. They're kind of embarrassed to show up and enter a group that they don't know what to do. So I used to not agree with personal training. Like, no, just come in the group, get the energy. And then I realized, like, why am I telling people no to the thing that they want? They wanted personal training so they could learn, so they could be at their own pace. I think we said this before, like, men who don't do the strength training, they could be in their 40s or 50s and still be the insecure 15-year-old kid. They're just an older body, but the mind was never developed. So I pay attention to these little things, and we try to build that and train, but not destroy yourself. Train so you feel good. There's energy in the tank. That energy goes to the family.
How long do you find it takes, if they're 5-10 years deconditioned, for them to actually start to become conditioned enough that they're going to feel that difference in their life?
I think emotionally they feel it after the first workout. And then within a month.
Well, assuming the trainer's not a fucking idiot and beating them into the ground.
Exactly. And I think a lot of trainers, like, as you know, there's a million certifications and this and that. And I'm actually shocked at how many people don't understand how to just train somebody in a simple, effective manner. We're just doing it.
It's kind of fucked up.
Yeah. You're like, dude, it's the information's out there. You're just denying it or not coming across the right info. But they start feeling great emotionally in day one, which, as you know, that has an impact on your physical. After a few weeks, 3-4 weeks, they are really physically feeling the transformation. And kind of our workouts would look like GPP plus supplemental work. That you know what I'm saying? And but to me, the most important thing, a lot of men are not like looking for six-pack abs. They want to feel strong, and they want the confidence and the energy. And I'm also learning the majority of women we train, because of the age category, that's also what they want. They want to feel strong and energetic and not run down and exhausted. They're not worried so much about the appearance. And I spoke with a buddy of mine. He's out in California, Blake Bernard, and he has 2 gyms. They're side by side. The one gym is for athletes, the other one's for adults. And I saw a video of the men training, and I saw like the breath. I was like, do you not have heat in your gym or air conditioning? And he's in somewhere in like Northern California where it gets just friggin' hot as hell. He's like, no heat and no air conditioning. And we make it very clear that this is a place of work. And he's like, the majority of people we get tend to be entrepreneurs and white collar workers. He's like, we're about 60% men, 40% women. And that kind of gave me a couple of green lights of like, stop babying people. Stop worrying about, I start overthinking, oh, we don't have air conditioning. We don't have bikes. We don't have cardio equipment. We strength train. We build muscle. We do sleds every day. Sleds, carries, body weight stuff. And it's just interesting when you see somebody else like going hard, you're like, yeah, man, it's okay to go hard, not destroy them. And so that, he said, we're just getting people that want to be strong. And it's interesting because in my head, I was like, oh, people, that's not what they're chasing. They do. They want feeling.
How did you in your mind? Yeah. Because your whole history has been around either training to get jacked, strong, or performance. All that. Like health was the secondary outcome.
Yes.
So how did you have to twist your mind to be able to see that some people don't care about those 3 things, but health is their first outcome?
Yeah. Being around, I think with my kids in sports, I've always been surrounded by men round about my age but you've seen this. They're your age, but they look 10, 15 years older than you because they don't do any strength training. They don't do anything physical. You hear them talk and they've just got like 100 excuses, and you're just like, man, if I could just get this guy in some basic strength training and eating a little bit better. And so I was around it. And also as I got older, you know, I'm going to be 50 next year, you just start thinking differently. You want to be strong. You don't want to beat the crap out of your body because you need the energy to take care of family. So I just put myself in their shoes, and you and I have studied business a lot. And I always remember Dan Kennedy saying, enter the conversation in the person's mind. What are they thinking about? What are their biggest fears and doubts? And then there was a guy that mentored him, Gary Halbert, who said the biggest advantage in business is a starving crowd. And that's where I bring up Brett Contreras. Who's more hungry to grow their butt and transform their body, men or women? Women want to do it. But I also, Dave, we have these conversations a lot about passion and purpose. My heart is more centered around get people strong, not so much help you see your abs. Yeah. To me, that surface stuff, it comes and goes. But feeling strong and the feeling, to me, is more powerful than what we see in the mirror. It's like training for a powerlifting meet. You were training to lift certain poundages, and then when it's over, what you miss is the journey and the process and the people you were with and the things it took. That's where the growth happens. And so Nate was just saying, he's like, I think we should do a new challenge. So I'm not a big believer in the 6-week transformation, blah, blah, blah. But speaking with guys in business, they're like, listen, you don't like it, but other people like that it has a start and an end date. And so I spoke with Mike Guadango about this. I was like, what do you do for your transformation? He's like, basic. Body weight on the scale and waist measurement. I'm like, you don't got an in-body? You're not doing this? He's like, I don't have that stuff. And so I'm overthinking it. And so I called it, I was thinking of like Rocky 3, the tough gym. So I was like, we're just going to call it the tough transformation challenge. Sometimes I lose who I am because I overthink things. And I'm just like, dude, let's just get people strong and be who we are. Like, let's be who we are.
So do you find, because you said earlier, you don't know what they're searching,
yes,
to be able to find that, while on the other end, we have, being strong has been basically demonized,
yes,
in replace of whatever functional or whatever it's going to be called there. I doubt they're seeing that, but they could be, and that could be what's intimidating.
Yeah, it's intimidating for somebody. Think about like the last time they've exercised. If you're 48 and the last time you lifted anything was age 18 in your high school weight room, they say, we're intimidated. I'm afraid to look dumb. I'm afraid that you got to spend too much time with me. And so I listen to them, and with us in business, I always say, there's no pressure. Like, do you want us to do personal training? What would make you happy to get you started here? And I just let them talk and listen to them. And listening to, as you know, this probably happens to you a lot. People see how you're built. All of a sudden, they start asking you all these questions on training. I got to hear all these conversations, like going to a gazillion baseball games for my son, tennis matches with my daughter. Oh, so you work out? Oh, what do you do? I used to do this, but my knee, my that. In baseball, hey, like, yeah, my son goes to this place. They do all fast twitch work and arm care. I'm listening to the buzzwords. I don't agree with those words and fads and gimmicks, but I know that that's what's in their head. So I just listen to people. It's like, I remember a lot of our conversations, like thinking about gyms. I don't know if we ever would have said home gyms were going to be this friggin' massive thing. Never would I have guessed that people would have home gyms the size of their actual home, right? But people want it. And so I just listen to what people want. And so I take that listening and apply it to the adults. What do they want? Start with that. Give them what they need. Same thing with athletes. I don't hear parents ever telling me, listen, my son, my daughter is not strong. Get them strong. Nope. They say he needs or she needs speed and agility, core strength. And do you do anything specific for, name this sport, for baseball, for volleyball? In the early days, being such diehards, you cannot get fast unless you're strong.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear you negating what they're requesting. And you know what? I still hear coaches doing that, especially if they come from our background of strength, powerlifting. I go, listen, stop telling parents that the kid can't get fast. Just agree with what they're looking for and craft something. And just like you said, the word strength has been demonized. And I say to these coaches, listen, guys, I don't know where you're coming up with this problem, but I don't have this problem where our athletes are just so strong. It's like interfering with their ability to be fast. I don't have that. I haven't seen that for a very long time. I tell people the only time I experienced that was when I was at Lehigh. The heavyweight benched 405 for a triple in season. And I was like, whoa, that was kind of fucking scary, dude, because you blow out a pec. You know, that's how I was thinking. And I have not come across somebody who's squatting too much. Now, do I see kids who maybe the way they squat is not good or their speed in the squat is not good? Of course I do. But they got to still get stronger. They need to add weight to the bar. But we're in an interesting place where the word strength is being kind of frowned upon. And I think the reason why is nobody, I don't want to say nobody, I hate these like very black. I live more in the gray, meaning when we're training for strength, we're also training for power. We're like, if you're squatting, you're doing it, you're supersetting it with a jump or sometimes like a short acceleration drill. If you're benching, I also have med ball throws for power. I might have you do, upper body plyos, all kinds of plyo push-ups. So everything is like, if you're in the gray, that's what a lot of athletes and adults need. That doesn't attract the likes and the views because it's actually common sense. Hey, I'm training adults. We do some strength work. We do some supersets, boost up their fitness a little bit. We do some moderate rep ranges to build muscle. Well, what's so crazy about that? Nothing. So that doesn't garner attention. Okay. But if I say, squatting is the devil, now I got 100 fucking people commenting on my shit, and that's just stupid. Like, I like saying, hey, I'm doing what people need.
Well, as somebody that's been training people for decades, does that metric even matter? You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't give a shit about it.
I mean, what we're talking about is positioning.
Yep.
Likes, views, however you want to do that. But at the end of the day, from a business perspective, there's conversions.
Yep.
Right. So I would not think that would matter. Right. Because you could have 100,000 views, but no conversions, or 100 views. You have to. And one conversion.
You got to catch people where they are. And usually people take action when there's some sort of pain involved. And that's the meaning. If I'm an athlete or if I'm a parent of an athlete, maybe my pain is I'm thinking if I don't find a way to help my daughter, she will never achieve her potential. If I don't get a great sports performance coach for my son, he might miss this baseball season due to the injury he had last year. So that kind of pain. But in sports performance world, I hate to say this, I tell coaches, I go, guess what? You know what would make you a lot of money? Have an open gym with turf, and you just call yourself like, I don't know, like Speed First, Speed First Academy. Everybody wants that because that's what's on their mind. They think everybody's slow, but if I want to get you fast, I need to do some strength training. I need some squatting, but that word scares people. But
but I wonder if the lifetime value of that client would be anywhere near the same.
We see a lot of turnover for a couple of reasons. I don't want to say we see a lot of turnover, but more than ever before. And it's kind of was like, when we did the first podcast, we were talking about in the beginning, you didn't have too many places to do your powerlifting. You know, you could go to West Side, and I don't know where else you would go. But then you said other lifters started opening gyms. And if they didn't like what was going on at this gym, they had another option. They had another option to go somewhere. So, for example, we train a lot of middle school kids. Training high school kids has been tough because of how crazy the schedule is, Dave. Like, it's out of control. I don't think they know what it's like to actually like lift one day and have nothing else to do besides some homework and hang out. It's just a constant run around to this sport club or to the multiple sport clubs. So when we lose kids, we lose them to some very unique things. Here would be an example. We trained a kid and he loves it. Okay. He just transformed him. The way he could move, the muscle, the confidence, the dad sending us messages about how he looks when he's on the field in this sport. He's like, it's amazing. Well, now there's a lot of prominent private schools in our area. And I'm not sure how it is in Ohio, but in New Jersey, the public schools are really starting to struggle to compete. Like, the private schools are just kicking the shit out of people.
Yeah.
So long story short, he's going to do a reclass year, which means you repeat 8th grade. You're a year older. You're more mature. You grow, all these things. And then the private school coaches also work inside of a sports club. And now if I could go to that sport club, now that private wrestling coach, lacrosse coach, basketball coach, he knows my son. And now my son has this chance of going to that school. And so you're seeing, like, I guess, NIL junior essentially happening at the high school level. And so when we lose kids, we lose them for those reasons. A positive reason we might lose them is high schools having a legit strength coach in there. And we never tell kids, hey, fuck your high school strength coach. What our rule is, and it's always been this way, the coaches know this, ask Dave, what did he do at school? And now you're going to fill in the blanks. Or if he did cleans at school and he worked up to a heavy single, you could do 3x3 speed and technique on cleans. You know, you can get that volume in. Or they're not jumping and doing sleds. Okay, we're going to do jumping and sleds. So we will fill the gaps with what is missing. But the kids are so busy today that also what's changed, and maybe this will change in the times, like all, you know, the equilibrium swings, is the sport skill is really prioritized at a high level, and then they're just running out of time to do proper athletic strength training. And I use that phrase, our buddy House calls it athletic strength training. I said, that sounds great, meaning I always tell dads, I'm 49, I go, Dad, name a teammate, you know, let's say you played baseball or football, name a teammate from when you graduated in 1991, 92, who had an injury that required surgery. Name one teammate. They're like, nobody. Okay, you played baseball. How many baseball players had to get a Tommy John surgery in 1992? Nobody. How many of your basketball teammates rolled their ankle fucking 50 times in a season? Nobody. I go, okay, the system is broken. But there's so much like emotional pressure from these parents, they're afraid they're missing out, that they're just doing all the sports skill. And what we see is the best keep getting better, and there's not really a middle ground where like a kid could kind of try out for a team in high school and build athletically. Because if you play basketball all year. Girls soccer is playing all year, and so you're seeing this high level of skill, but they don't get enough physical preparation, and so they break. They physically fall apart.
How does that articulate up, though? Let's go with when you were coaching the college wrestlers.
Sure.
How many of them, if you looked back in their history, were doing all the club shit?
They were, but not multiple clubs and not the frequency of it. And so they were stronger. Our kids today are not as strong as they once were, and the frequency of training tends to be twice.
See, that's what I'm wondering, is if the ultimate payoff, you know, playing in college or going to the top level, is actually happening or not. Because
I don't know the specific numbers, Dave, but what might happen with football, wrestling, there's been like a cap on roster. Things are changing with that NIL. So like a wrestling team, I think used to have like 37 people. Now it's capped at 30. Those 7 that used to be, would never start, but they would be great teammates. They'd be great training partners. They'd always be there for you. And then I heard something great about it is those guys that were not elite enough, they were the ones that often had like the best grades, and they would come back and make the donations. And then I've heard, hey, now you're losing those 7 guys. In football, they're barely ever recruiting a kid right out of high school. They're getting a JUCO or a D3 transfer, so there's no more developmental group. You remember these conversations with Buddy when he was at Pitt, House when he was at, I don't know, when he was on the Q&A, was he at Louisville or I can't remember. But they would talk about, hey, we get incoming freshmen, we do this 6-week thing. Yeah. What I'm seeing, and I don't, make stats, I'm just like doing numbers in my head, is we used to have kind of like a wider, higher level of kids. Those higher level kids, they don't take the strength training as seriously anymore. I personally feel like they're sick of being coached. They have been coached since age 5 on how to jump, and like everything is so controlled that they just want to, quote unquote, do my own thing. I just want to go to this, I don't know, what's like a chain gym in this area? What do you have? Do you have what?
Lifetime Fitness.
Okay, Lifetime. Yeah. We have a Lifetime by us. There's Retro Fitness is like a big chain gym. The kids just want to go there. And you know how they train is they train kind of the wrong way I did in high school. Machines, pump up work, but they're like starving to have something of their own because I'm going to volleyball club. And then this other thing. Then I got a private with the volleyball trainer. And they get to a point where we've sometimes lost kids where the dad says they just want to train with their friends. Because I think they're over coached with everything that they just want some freedom.
Well, it's still interesting to me because I would think that the financially lower demographic aren't going to be able to pay for all the club stuff, right? But
they find a way, I think.
They do.
I think if you want something, right, so you find a way to do it.
Booster or something like that.
I just think whatever, they put it on a credit. It's what do you value? To this day, the sport that I feel right now is valuing strength training the most is baseball. You see them really strength training hard. You see sports like football kind of focusing more on speed and movement. But if you watch a football game, that's the ultimate assessment. Like, hey, your linemen, they can't block anybody, or your line or your D line is getting bulldozed over. To me, that means lacking some skill, lacking strength and power. And so I look at like where we are in the world of business. I had this conversation with a buddy and I said, hey, in business, if you just went all turf, all speed, he's like, I'm not doing that. He's like, that's fucking selling out. He's like, because the kids need it all. They need to squat. They need to deadlift and sprint and jump. And I get kids at my high school, or we'll get kids who maybe come to the underground. They were somewhere else. It was all like speed work. They could sprint and jump, but they have zero strength. And when is your strength really exposed? In competition. So if I'm a volleyball player, feeling the aches of the shoulder. If I'm a wrestler and you get somebody who's just strong, you can feel it. In football, you feel it. But when you're doing running drills and jumping drills, you're just competing for time, how high I'm jumping. There's kind of no like real pain if you don't make it.
Well, all those are still kind of anchored in absolute strength.
You got to be strong, but not ignore those other traits. And really any smart strength coach, and it's funny, they often like really hammer on powerlifters. Oh, you're a powerlifter. Well, powerlifters incorporate dynamic effort. Louis always spoke about jumping. I feel like you follow that kind of style of training. You add a lot of GPP with sleds, carries, high rep calisthenics. You throw med balls and you prioritize sport skill, you will be a very dangerous athlete.
Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by Element. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. That's 8 single serving packets for free. And if you're an Element Insider, you have first access to Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. Get yours at drinkelement.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link.
But the sports travel teams kind of take up a lot of the time, and I think parents are fucking exhausted. And not emotionally, physically, and I think they get to a point where financially exhausted.
Well, yeah.
It's a lot of money.
We're just traveling around all the time.
You're just crushed. And so I empathize with that because I've done all the travel stuff with my son, and I always like to Dave to be super transparent, meaning, hey, my gym's killing it. No, I like to share the downtimes. Same thing with injuries. You know, my son got little leaguer's shoulder, and I was like, what the F is that? And so the benefit of guys like you and I having connections is I could go right to a high-level PT who we know, who's also a strength coach, and just say, what is that? And they say, it's an overuse injury, and it's just no downtime. And so I always say, like, that shit, you never heard of that 10, 15 years ago. Why do we hear about it now? Because it never ends. And then also I said to my son, hey, man, I let you train with your friends, you know, who's going through that phase. Oh, me and my friends are training. Well, you guys train like bodybuilders, then you're doing the forced reps and you're doing such high volume. You've got an overuse of sport with like an incorrect physical preparation program. So I said to him, I go, all right, I let you do it on your own, and you blew it. You just fucked up your body. So I go, now you got to train at the underground, and you got to listen. And I tell coaches when they're like, hey, we want your son or we want your daughter doing all this, I'll just be honest with them. I'll say, you know that's not what is the best thing for them. That's why we see all these injuries in baseball. And I think the business side of that, Dave, is if you genuinely care about the kids, you have to sometimes say, hey, we're not going to do this. There's going to be a stop to it. And that means less money from a business. Travel teams are multi-million-dollar businesses when they're really run in such a way. And so I always say, like, when you get hurt, does anybody reach out to you? Does anybody check in with you? Is there plan B on how to segue you into something that's lesser or connect you with PT? So the sports performance world is in a real strange place now. Like technology is very much favored, and I'm still a believer, not because it's my mindset, but because I see like the way kids are performing, they still need work. They need more of that GPP. I'm kind of shocked when I look at like a college football program and it's like squat, bench, clean, jump. I'm looking for carries. I'm looking for some odd lifting, especially for the linemen. Maybe, we're only seeing the bird's eye view with stuff, but I feel like you could get trapped in that. And I'm okay with us being known for the underground is a place of work, and that's what we do. But, back to, I know I kind of jump around when I have so much shit on my mind. The whole culture thing is, I overthink it, and then I'll see somebody who's like, yeah, man, we're a place of work, and it's okay to be the place of work. I used to really be too intense on that side of the spectrum. You know, I give a lot more, like I tell the coaches, hey, first 2 weeks, ease an athlete into it. Whereas when I was coaching, if you were like quitting, you're never coming back. You had to fight through this. Like, I didn't call it a free introductory workout. It was a trial. And you knew that this was a tryout. I treated it like a fight club. That doesn't work today. So training has evolved to match the personality traits of the kids and the parents and their schedules, their crazy schedules. You know, the early days of the underground, kids would lift at school, go home, have a protein shake, and come to the underground. Bang, second workout. 2 to 3 nights a week, they'd be playing street pickup basketball. I haven't seen a street pickup basketball game in almost 20 years.
Do you have kids come in that aren't athletes?
No. At my high school, a little bit, because I know that sometimes that is the window to get them. They lack confidence. They have no strength. You start getting them strong, they might think, hey, you know what? I might be able to throw the shot put, or I might be able to run track. I might be able to enter this sport. But we don't have kids that show up and it's like their parents are like, hey, I just want my kid to be fit. We're not, I don't want to say we can't do it. We certainly could. But the training is hard, and if you're not training for something, I notice that kids don't like that. So at my high school, if you're in my strength and conditioning class, the prerequisite is you're in a sport. Well, whenever I see a kid who's maybe in a sport and then they quit because they're like, I don't like it, they start realizing the skill, there's just too much of a skill gap, or they're like, I got to get a job to buy a car. I notice that they lose intensity. They start doing things like skipping squats and not doing the sleds. Why? There's no threat. I don't need to be so.
The reason I'm asking is more along the lines of the mental health crisis that we see with the younger kids.
Huge.
You know, where the training can help with that.
I speak about this so often. That word is utilized big time in the schools. Mental health. It's also utilized big time in like veteran association. And so when I saw like there's been those posts of like how the US tax dollar is like funding Taliban like $10 million a week, I'm like, dude, every high school should have like a weight room for athletes and a kind of like a fitness center for the kids, and get them to come in and use machines and be unintimidated. I'm just going to put the pin in here and I could pump this out and I could sit down or lay down. That's perfect for them. And as you and I know, how do you feel when you exercise? I mean, I think there's been research on exercise for 22 minutes of exercise like gives you 12 hours of increased happiness. I know that if I'm not in a great mood, I just got to do 20 push-ups and it changes everything. And so I challenge schools, and schools are very slow moving. You know, my assistant principal said it perfectly. He goes, schools are like a tugboat. They're slow. It's not like you and I. We have a small business. Hey, I don't like this. Bang. I change it right on the minute. Everything's like, it's got to go to this meeting at the end of the month, then that next meeting, then it's approved, or nothing happens until the summertime when this XYZ is approved.
They need a meeting for the meeting to have the meeting.
And I hate that because that to me is the antithesis of success, right? If I want to be successful, there's got to be an element of speed and the ability to make decisions quickly. That to me would be huge. Do we do that? No, because we don't have the time. I think bringing in a kid who's not in sports and he enters the underground when we have groups is it'll turn them away. They'll be too scared. You got to kind of organize them either one-on-one or small groups, and like it's a slow, steady thing. But to me, we speak about mental health. The fact that exercise is not in every school, I mean, that's a major problem.
Used to be, right?
Yeah, it used to
That's how you started, if I remember.
Yeah, well,
you were a phys ed teacher, were you not?
Yeah, elementary phys ed, and I started that. My first hire was 98, and then 2002, I started in my parents' garage backyard. And then once I tore my ACL, that's how I came across Elite FTS. I just researched Russian wrestling training. So what did I come across? Milo's conjugate sequence system thesis, your articles, Louis, of course, Jim. But how you want to get somebody, like, to me, I think I said this before, the schools and every VA should have a weight room. Okay. Like, if I don't know how that works, but they should be calling you guys, setting up sleds, squat racks, dumbbells, and bands, and get these guys exercising on the regular. High schools need fitness centers, every single one. The problem is not just money, but where do they put it? There's got no space. But that's what's needed if we want people to be in better moods. Because if you want to get depressed, just start staring at your phone and do nothing. It's the ultimate feeling of being unproductive and just being like, dude, I just wasted an hour of my life, 2 hours. I mean, I doubt it's odd for kids. It's probably common for kids to go home and just scroll through a phone for 4 hours. Where will you feel productive? You're just consuming. You want to produce and create, and that's what gets you feeling good. You know, movement, doing, creating.
I think maybe they are trying to do that, but because I think the number one profession that they aspire to is to be an influencer, right? And if we dig deep into that, to do that, they have to be a creator.
Yeah.
Right. So I think inherently we all want to create. We all want to build. We all want to contribute. We all want to do something. But that's kind of a rough path to go because not a whole lot of people make. That'd be the same as somebody's, I want to play in the NFL, you know, when they're starting, but not having the ability to play.
It's very
JV, junior high, you know.
And then you're locked. You're like handcuffed to that phone. And, you know, you said that's interesting. Like, we want to create, you know, I post content on the regular, and am I happy that a video gets 150 views on YouTube, or, you know, whatever the low views are on Instagram? No, that doesn't make me happy. But you know what is good? That I did it and that I'm impacting one person. But if you're young, what are you likely doing? I'm looking at Gary V or Casey Neistat, and they got millions, and I got 20 followers, and I suck, and I'm a loser. You know, we all got to start in the bottom eating shit. And what's interesting too is, like, my earlier days of YouTube, when there's no competition, those videos would get 1,000, 2,000 views. Now my videos get 100 or a few hundred. So even though I'm fucking 100 times smarter than I was when I started 20 years ago, I'm working harder and I'm getting less out of it.
Well, see, I don't know if I agree with that, because I think this is where a lot of coaches misinterpret those numbers, because the way you built your business when it was in your backyard, I mean, kind of garage, but mostly backyard, right? And park, was talking to people in the neighborhood. Right? Yeah. You only needed to talk to 15, 20 people to get one.
Yes.
Right? But you had the attention of the 15 people that you're in front of, right? To where at that time, if you were invited to speak at one of these private schools in a health class with the athletes, and it's 20 kids. Yeah. You're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do this, because out of the 20 kids, they can afford it. I got a probability of maybe getting 10, 15%. But if you were to give that same presentation at the biggest high school in the stadium during Friday night football, you're going to get 0, because nobody's going to be tuned in.
They're not.
Because of that, because the bigger numbers don't necessarily mean conversion and impact. So if it's only 100 people, or if somebody only has 50 people, but they're 50 people that actually know them and then are following them, then the impact, A, is going to be greater, and B, from the metric side, the conversions are going to be better. So if you start chasing that bigger number, then you're going to dilute those 50 people that actually give a fuck. And they're going to be like, what the fuck is he doing? This isn't him.
There's that old article called 1,000 True Fans. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Or is it 100 True Fans?
I think it's 1,000.
1,000, but it's basically saying if 100 out of the 1,000 are your diehard fans, and they just each pay you $10 a month. That's 120 grand. But he's like, they're diehards.
You know how many online, because you'll remember this, you know how many online coaches actually followed that and did extremely well?
Focus.
Very well.
We're trying to do that with the gym. Like now that I took myself off the floor this past summer, was very hard for me because like you write your books in the gym. We are the iron, you know? So taking myself off the floor was stressful to me. But I knew that if I wanted to grow the gym, I had to use my creativity to get that. Like our town is small. I think it's like less than 2 square miles. I was like, man, I need to impact the people close to us in this town. And what's crazy is we were there 12 years. The first 10 to 11 years, you'd be looking at a group. There's one kid from our town. And then there's the other 10. So 90+% were coming from neighboring towns. And I was like, I got to do better in this little area. And, it's just interesting you say that because same thing with online is I said, you know what? I am going to now, I started getting a lot of questions from the, I always call it like quote unquote, getting older crowd. We've got the bumps and bruises from our past sports and lifting. And so from a business standpoint, I always said earlier, what's better, women or men? Women are hungrier. But I said, my heart is about helping men get strong. But you are right. Like if I'm always looking at numbers, which I'm not like the best at analyzing, but I see my YouTube views and whatnot. The end of the day is who are you impacting, changing lives? And that should really be in business for what we do. That should be a core value. Like, are you changing lives with what you're doing? Or is this just kind of like a go through the motions type thing? I also think what's tricky online, Dave, is people are just so used to scrolling. So they struggle with more than 5 seconds of attention, right? So an expert might say to you, hey, your video is 5 minutes. You go 30 seconds. And then it's like, am I catering to people who can't handle a 2-minute video? You know what I'm saying? And so the impact starts changing as we get older because we realize like, man, this time goes very fast and you want it to be something deeper.
I think Buddy Morris calls that entertainment. So instead of entertainment, because it's essentially just entertainment.
He said a lot of, like, think about what he said 20 years ago, calling some personal trainers personal terrorists.
Yeah.
And he had been around, I think he had been around enough pro and college stuff that even though it wasn't a big, population of coaches back then, I think he had experienced enough of them kind of training his athletes and then they come back worse. And you're like, what the hell is that? Then you do it enough and you realize, shit, I thought everybody understood how to train. They're going to this place for 6 months and they're coming back worse. Buddy being on those like cusp of all that stuff. It's interesting how what was said decades ago is even more prominent now. Yeah.
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes.
And for most people, they just need to get strong. It's pretty fucking simple.
Yeah.
When you get down to it. Last podcast, we talked a little bit about the Ultimate Warrior, but I want to go into that a little bit more because you knew him a little bit better than just the personality that was online, which was amazing, by the way.
I know. You always would repost the squad.
Oh, my God. His post-wrestling career videos. I wish the YouTube was still up. You know, some of those were just, it is?
Yeah. It's a crazy story. I think they were like deleted, but then they were brought back up and other people downloaded them and uploaded them. And I was thinking about Ultimate Warrior. I was thinking about how quick people could forget about you if you are in a job and you are fired or released, like these college strength coaches. And I was thinking about Ultimate Warrior and Louis Simmons, how people are still sharing their information, like true legacy. And so you always sharing that video of like, he's like, you're gonna squat like you're shitting over a hole, and everybody like laughs at first. And I tell people that was not an act. As soon as he moved into something that was like physical, his intensity went up 100-fold. So if we were on the phone, we would always talk about family, you know, our wife, our children, lifting, and he was big in like just being intense in stuff. And so the way that we first met was, you know, the power of the internet. And I had came across his video. Somebody may have shared it on Twitter back then, which is now X. The one of like, my passion is passion, you know? And I was like, whoa, man, I could actually relate to that, because I get passionate about training and life and get fired up. And I always, people would kind of have comments about like how that's weird to be so fired up for life. And when I saw that video, I was like, I feel that. And so I just Google his name. He had a website and a contact, and I email him through the website, and I kind of introduced myself through there. And he's like, I totally know who you are. He's like, I used to read your articles on Elite FTS all the time. He's like, I love what you're doing, and I love what you're doing with those kids at the underground. And that just became some like back and forth messaging. And I think I had made a video of like, I'm training in my garage, and I was like very fired up after seeing the Ultimate Warrior video. And he liked it. And what he liked most in people was other people who were passionate. And he had those struggles with WWF, which was WWE. So he loved when people just stayed true to themselves and were like good to other people, kind of like, you know, a simple man. And we would exchange emails. And then one day through emails, he's like, just give me a call. You know, he's like, I'm up very early. And so every time we'd be on the phone, we would talk about strength training, old school gyms. I remember him telling me about his first gym, the one in Arizona, where he just said one day he shut down the gym and refunded everybody their money because he felt like their passion and intensity was not there. And he was like, I will not work with people who are not passionate, which is fucking real hard. Like, if you want everybody to be like you, that's the best way to get disappointed.
Especially him.
Leg press as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, this looks so good.
It's just upgraded with a laser cut. It can be a vinyl cut.
You can still do the one leg at a time?
Yep.
Nice.
So pull apart one leg at a time.
Hi guys, Matt Goodwin, elitefts.com equipment sales. We are looking at the Monster Mondo leg press. Boy, this thing is a monster, guys. This is our biggest version of this unit. So we do have a smaller footprint, which won't be as wide, a little bit smaller, a little bit more user-friendly. This is our biggest one. This is gonna be isometric leg press. So it does have a release here in the middle. You can take that out, so you can do independent leg movements on here, put it back in. It's just one continuous sled. When the weights are empty, this thing weighs 300 pounds. So that's why we have the band pegs on the top, so you can deload the weight on this. A lot of your clients or athletes, younger kids, stuff like that, they're not gonna be able to use this thing. That's why we have the band pegs up there. So we don't just stick them up there for just show, they're there for a reason. So that's to deload the weight of the carriage, because it's gonna be extremely heavy. Also have band pegs down here, so you can add accommodating resistance to it if you'd like. We have these safety stoppers here. They're, you know, adjustable, set them to where you need to get that stopping point, so that weight doesn't come crashing down at you once you're fatigued. The other good thing about this is a seat pad does adjust, so you can get different angles on here as well. Basically all you do is you lift up, slide the handles out, releases the weight, then you can go ahead and do your movements. This particular unit is shown with the optional laser cut logo panels on the sides. This does not come with those, so that's an extra thing. If you want to do that, put your school, your gym, your facility, anything like that, contact equipment specialist, and we can guide you through that process, get you guys quotes and mock-ups and stuff like that. Available in any color you guys want on this stuff. Same thing with pads, so you're not married to one thing. The other thing about this is way too big to fit on a lift gate. So UPS shows up at your house, it's not coming off. So this is gonna be something that you're gonna need a forklift or a loading dock. There's just no way around it. It's just too massive. There's no way to bolt this thing together. It's a whole solid weld. So it is gonna need double doors to go through. So You're gonna need double doors, nothing in the middle, or a garage bay door to get this thing inside. Now the smaller footprint, you may have a little bit more luck, probably getting through maybe a 42-inch door. Then we have the regular leg press that's not isometric, but that'll fit through a 36-inch door. So we have 3 different options of leg presses on the website. Go to www.elitefts.com, go to equipment, drop down, plate loaded, you'll see all the leg presses on there. If you guys want to order the Monster Mondo leg press, please contact an equipment specialist. So again, hit us up. You reach me directly at mgoodwin@elitefts.net. Yeah, we'll help you out with this thing. But great piece, solid, big. If there's a tornado or a hurricane, hide underneath this thing, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that was a struggle for me. That I actually still struggle with it. A lot of people have to say to me, like at my school, they're like, Zach, when you're here, you can't train these kids like you're at the underground. They're different. They're just kind of making me, I guess, be more level-headed. But our conversations were always kind of surrounding that training, old school bodybuilding, family. And then when he would get into the business side of things, he was very heartbroken over the battles with pro wrestling. And so one phone call turned into every other day, check in, call one another. And then a video came out of that, which was like a TV network contacted him to kind of go in and train these. That was a rock band where they were essentially like partying like crazy, drinking. I'm not sure what other stuff they did, but they were basically blowing their career. And I don't know who contacted him, but once that video came out, from what I understood, is TV networks had reached out to him to create basically some sort of Ultimate Warrior TV show that was not just impacting them through training, but the mindset. He was big on the mindset stuff. And so what he said to me was, he sent me an email one day saying, I've had some outreach from TV networks and they want me to bring this kind of a warrior mentality to, I can't remember exactly what he said, if it was for rock bands or something in the entertainment industry. He's like, but I've had my time in the limelight. I don't care to like be the main person. He's like, I would love if you could help me with the strength training component and I do the mindset. And so I remember emailing him back saying, listen, as your friend, I would love to help you out. And we would speak like every other day. And I said, yep, I would love to help you out. So he responds. He's like, fuck yeah. He's like, you will be the warrior beast coach. And I remember after that, he would never email me as like addressing it to Zach. It was like WBC. And so his, the Ultimate Warrior was, as much as it was a quote unquote show and a character, what I tell people is, as soon as he moved into that mode of doing wrestling or getting in front of people, I don't even know if that's the alter ego, whatever we want to call it, he flipped the switch. He became the warrior. His name, legal name, was Warrior. And so we laugh at the story of when he called my house. It was a long time ago, like having landline. I remember my wife answering the phone and I'm in my office and my wife's like, Zach, you have a phone call? I'm like, all right, who is it? And she's like, Warrior, man? Like thinking it's some sort of joke. I was like, yeah, Ultimate Warrior. So what happens is, he's very hyped up over this. There's these opportunities being presented to him. And at the time was the first, he had seen that we were going to do the first underground strength conference. And he was coming to New Jersey to speak at some sort of an event for former pro wrestlers. I don't know what it was called, but it was ironically a day or two before our event. So he says, okay, if you help me with this, then I would come and speak at your event if you'll have me. And that's when I said, I don't need to keep score that I did this for you and now you owe me. I said, but if you need my help, I'd love to do that. And that's when he was like, fuck yeah. So he spoke at that event. Then he spoke at our event on the second day, blew the roof off the place. Like I have it on video and I never publicly released it because that was June. And I think like in the fall, he started working with WWE again, and I didn't want any legal issues. Even though we technically owned it, we recorded it, it was our event, I just never released it. But he blew the roof off the place. And then as soon as he started working with WWE, we really lost touch. We missed a few phone calls. I missed him, you missed me, then just kind of stopped talking. And then I don't know how much longer it was, like a year or 2 years later, he passes away after that speech he gave, getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so a lesson there was a lot of like, really, to me, as you and I know, we get older, you start looking at time differently, and you're like, man, I really should have reached out to that person. And he would get frustrated with people who he knew that people had the potential. He wanted to instill in them that kind of warrior mentality, but he had the kind of this like flip side, did not want to have to help them so much. He wanted them to find it from within. So he was torn with that. And so he was building a website and trying to put out this kind of warrior mindset stuff. And so I put him in touch with my web designer. Long story short with that, she lost touch with him, and he hadn't paid her. He was just kind of off the grid, which he would do. If things were crazy, he would literally go walk the desert. I think he was living in New Mexico, and just disappear from the noise of the world. So he wanted to help, but the connection to the internet, and I think he felt like people were consuming versus doing, and it would frustrate him. So he would get into it, and then he would kind of disappear. And so, when he passed away, I felt like conversations left unsaid. So I remember I sent a letter to his wife with a zip drive of the speaking engagement, and she had texted me, and she said, he spoke about you all the time, loved you like a son, but the lesson there is, check in on friends, even if they're not getting back to you. You don't know what people are struggling with emotionally. We don't know. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. And I can't remember how she said it. Like maybe one day she said, like, I will explain to you why he didn't, speak with you those few years. It could have been legal stuff with pro wrestling, who knows. But that was heartbreaking to see that people could say, oh, he was on steroids, he was on drugs, he was on this. You and I have grown up around. I was telling Nate, I was like, dude, I grew up in gyms where people were on steroids. Guys, did drugs in the bathroom right before coming to squat. I just thought, even knowing that's wrong, that's what people do. So I don't judge people, what they do, this, that. But his wife said, like, he was so, like, passionate, maybe his, like, soul could not hold it. It was just, it was almost like too much for him. And so, but what kind of guy was he? A simple man who loved his family, loved strength training. He wanted to be a pro bodybuilder, and he was just passionate about being passionate about life. And so I always, when I hear that song, Simple Man, that reminded me of him. He had his art. He loved lifting. He had a gym in a barn with like old bodybuilding equipment, and that's where he would be in the mornings. And I find myself doing that too. Like, I can't send out a good email or write my book unless I've earned the right to write about it by training hard. And that's why I always think about you, like you wrote Under the Bar. And I always remember that photo, like on a little chair in the corner, because when you're amongst the weights, you feel it. The people who get that, they think that's normal. I would love to see more people getting that. And I think it was our upbringing, the kind of gyms we trained in, the kind of people that were mentors to us. And
you grow up in it.
Yeah, and it's that's what I was kind of saying earlier. If you're growing up in a gym today, you're missing that because you got your AirPods in. If I'm a kid and I see Dave Tate training, I'm just hoping Dave sees me squatting and will go up and say, hey, Zach, or hey, kid, move your feet out 1 inch and try that out.
How do you see this profession progressing with AI and all the technology that's coming out now?
I couldn't even predict what AI is going to do. You know, we've seen some AI videos and it looks real. I don't know. I couldn't even take a guess, but I believe in what you were saying earlier, Dave, about people will just be like, man, I just want to be around a human. I want to interact with people. So let's say you're training at home all the time. You eventually want a training partner. You want, I don't know, I think so. It would be great if I had training partners and people to share. I feel like the shared experiences are powerful, but they're very hard to get people away from the convenience of the phone and the realness of what we're going to see with AI. Gary Vee said what's going to defeat a lot of influencers is AI influencers who don't need to sleep, eat, go to the bathroom. They could just make content and they look real. He's like the AI influencer will beat everybody because that person can do it around the clock.
Yeah.
And my question too is like, how will that impact schools? Because there's already a teaching shortage. Will there be no teachers? Like, what will that do for strength coaches and teams? I don't know.
We'll see major disruptions over the next 5 years. I mean, we kind of saw that when in 2000, you know, just with the personal computer.
Yes.
See, we were prior to that. You know, so we saw the disruption that made, and this disruption is going to happen a lot faster than that time period, where if I was to project, and nobody can actually predict anything, but for the coaches, the authenticity and their ability to communicate, they're going to have to, those skills are going to have to be very good and better than everybody else, because on the other end of that, the programming, all the admin, all the stuff that you've had to do up to this point, you won't have to do.
Yes.
You'll be able to have basically an AI agent take care of all that, and the programming will be as good as yours with your philosophy.
Correct.
And fill in all the holes.
Yes.
So now that's one less thing you have to worry about. So what you have to worry about is the connection that you have with the people that you're working with, right? And if you suck at that, and if you're not willing to put the skills into that, you know, nonverbal communication, just connecting with people, you're fucked, you know? But for those that are really good, they're going to shine, you know? So my ultimate dream would be if we just look at the online programming sphere. You have a lot of people that just do online programming.
Yes.
Spreadsheets and whatever it's going to be. They're whacked, so they're gone, right? So, because they'll be replaced with the simple prompt and a GPT on, here's the program. There it is.
Yep.
But the good ones, you know, that have the connection, that have built and can build a rapport, hopefully they will then be able to charge what they're actually worth, right? Because in some ways they're handcuffed based upon what the average price of the online training costs across the board. So it doesn't matter if you're really good or if you suck, it's what, $250 a month or whatever it can be.
Sure.
You know, some outliers are going to be able to get more, but that's really based upon marketing and so forth. Now, if you can make it to the ones that are actually good, can charge, you know, I don't think they'll ever get equal to what they could get with personal training one-on-one, you know, per month, but get what they're actually valued. So, because what happens, and we've seen this happens, is they might start that way to where they're really good, but you can't earn a living doing that. So you have to bring on more clients.
The very few can. You know what this kind of like backpedal on a topic, but intertwined with this, talking about you're very good at your craft, but now this computer can, ChatGPT could pump it out. I say this to our coaches. I say this when I'm in front of other coaches. I go, guys, when we train somebody, a teenage athlete, okay, a youth athlete, they get in the car, the mom and dad don't say, did they do the conjugate method or linear periodization? They say, what'd you think? Do you like the coaches? Was it fun? Was it challenging? It's basically, do they like you?
Yes.
And what does that mean? Personality, communication. Joe Ken posted a video on that like a week or two ago. Like, hey, all these things are coming, but what they can't do is listen and communicate, although...
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
it's a very like strange one, but there was like a kid, I think, that was like in a relationship with the Chat GPT, and it like, I think he had like committed suicide. The like computer, it was something.
That's still digital though.
It's still digital. But when we do have like a coach who's struggling with the communication stuff, I say to them, you should go work at a restaurant, or you should be a bar back or a bartender. And so I often say my organizational and like fun skills came from being an elementary phys ed teacher. Or my first coaching job in 1995 was a hospital fitness center. And we would have all kinds of hospital employees training, as well as people within the town of all ages, from a teenager to somebody in their 60s and 70s, to working with somebody after, you name the surgery. I had to learn to communicate with all these people. And I say, I was just a kid who just competed in teen bodybuilding, but the best thing I learned there was the communication skills. And if you're not, mixing it up with people, I think you will be at a major deficit. But then there will also be plenty of people, Dave, who are like, you know what? I don't really care if I interact with another human. I'm perfectly fine with. There's always.
That's fine. There'll be professions for them.
100%. Right? There will always be the ends of the spectrum, and then kind of like where people fall into the bell curve.
But we're talking physical culture, so the word physical is implied.
Physical. I'm talking about like they want a trainer and things like that. I don't know. Like, I think of. It seems like yesterday, okay, when I was at the Arnold with you in 2007, I had a flip phone. Now it's like that was 18 years ago. Just the way things are moving, you are correct. They will change so quickly that I think at the end of the day, the best thing you could do is, who are you? What do you truly believe in? Stay in that lane. It's okay that some people don't like that. People are going to go where they want to go. I say that about our gym all the time. Like, we can't hold people. Sometimes they get bored. Sometimes they want to try something new. That's okay. People are going to do where they feel best about doing. And so, like you said, if you are your authentic self, that is the best way to, I think, succeed, because then you never got to fake it. You don't have to change with the times. You're just who you are, and you're evolving as you experience different things. Like, I've evolved in my coaching. I evolved a lot as my kids got a little older, because as I started speaking to other athletes, I said, how would I want a coach to speak to my son or daughter? And the way I ran the underground, in the early days, that was fucking crazy. Like, I was so intense. That was crazy. I would never do that now, because I would not want wouldn't be good for a girl that way anyway. It might be good for certain wrestlers in certain places, but for the most part, I have changed and evolved because of just being who I am.
What's it been like training your kids, and do you train your kids?
Yeah. So there's times where I did train them, or they trained with me. So it was more like together. And I always gave them freedom. Like, hey, daddy's doing this. What do you want to do? There have been times where they came to the underground when I was coaching. Most of the time it was great. Sometimes not. I tell people, I remember I kicked my daughter out of the gym during a crowded group, and that was not good. And then I said, that's it. Never train with me again. If you're going to the underground, you have to go when somebody else is there. And so the other thing too is like, I always try to remind myself, Zach, when you were a teenager, you were a fucking dummy. You did not listen great to your coaches. You weren't the most coachable. And so I always tell kids, hey, you guys heard of 3 chances? You get 3 chances. I'm more like 300 chances. You could keep coming back. If you have a bad day with me and I have a bad day with you, or I ask you to leave, come back. I'm hoping that you learn and can say sorry, and I get better from it. I still make mistakes today, but I'm not on the floor anymore. And what that has allowed me to do is take my kind of creative energy into growing the community aspect of the underground, which as you know, the reality is we get older, you have less energy. I mean, I remember writing articles at midnight, at 1 a.m. You could do it. You know, now at 9 o'clock, I have to stop because my creativity is just not good. And so that was, I noticed with my gym, I kind of hit a wall, and I said, when I pulled myself off the floor, was not just to grow the gym, but to not miss out on what my kids were doing. So I wanted to be able to take my daughter to all her tennis tournaments, because I didn't want to, as you know, in the college sector, you don't even get to see your kids grow up because you're married to the job. And I never wanted to look back at that. But, you know, back to, you know, my kids with my ADD of jumping around the topics, they grew up around me training. When we bought the house in the town we live in 15 years ago, I had a pair of rings, a climbing rope, and a couple kettlebells. So they saw me doing stuff, and they thought it was normal. Then when I opened that warehouse 12 years ago, my daughter would have been 6 and my son was 4. So my wife was very good. There was like a little office, and I was told her my concern is I'm running the Edison gym and Manasquan. She's like, it's okay. You'll see the kids every day. She put 2 beanbags in there. She put a TV in there, art stuff, and they would be in the office drawing, TV, this, that. Then they'd come out. I'd be coaching. They'd sit on a sled, you know, and then a kid would say, hey, Ethan, climb the rope. And then Summer would do this exercise. So they were around me. There would be times they'd be in group, but as they got older and those stronger personalities come out, my thing, Dave, is as you know, it's hard to put in words, the respect we have for the iron and what it does for you. When you're at the underground, or if I'm a coach here and I'm working here, I don't differentiate that you're my wife, you're my kid. There's a standard, and I believe, like in the weight room, all things are equal, meaning you don't get special treatment. I don't care if you're like, you know, the prince of, name the country, Saudi Arabia. You are here to work, period, end of story. Now, do I have a different personality for each person? Yes. But if you're not listening, like that day I kicked out my daughter, she wasn't listening. Then she's arguing with me. Well, look, if you're in here and you're going to act like a jerk, you're out. You're out of here. Same thing with my son. Like, he was kind of fucking around one day, and I still remember it. I was like, yo, if you're not here to work, go home. I don't want you here. And that throws people for a loop. But what it is that the weights, as you know, the gym, the weight room, there's no, like, I've always said, they don't care about the color of your skin, how much money's in your bank account. They don't care about what car your parents drive. You get no special treatment. You know, like that Henry Rollins, 200 pounds is always 200 pounds. That is always the beauty of the weight room, is it's a level playing field. You don't suddenly, like, the weights don't feel lighter because you come from a rich area or whatever the thing is. And that, to me, is the beauty. And on the flip side, I've said this, I am shocked at how I don't ever see a sport coach come into the weight room to say, hey, I'm looking at Dave Tate to come to, you know, XYZ University. Talk to me about his work ethic here. Does he show up on time? Is he respectful? Is he a leader? Give me some feedback on him. I am shocked at how those sport coaches are not checking in on that stuff. Blows my mind. Work ethic.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know, do I have a worker? I think, kind of like what I was saying earlier with college sports, they're really looking at talent. They're like, some kids don't work hard and they win a lot. And that's the job of the sport coach, right? Are we winning? Because if we're not winning, I don't care how much you squat. But I love it when I've had coaches reach out to me of kids we train at the underground. They already know the stats of this football player, this wrestler, this swimmer. Now they're asking me about the character. And I respect that coach who's willing to maybe not have the elite who has a shitty attitude. I'd rather have somebody who's maybe, you know, sub-elite, but great attitude. I could develop them. I could work them. But maybe now developing is not something happening in the colleges as much because they just move around so much, versus I'm staying here. I'm loyal to the program. I want to be with this coach and this team, and that changes stuff. But, you know, it's, you know, with kids, If you're a mom or dad out there, I think the best thing you could do is have something set up in the house where they see you training, so they're around it, so they think that hard work and strength is normal activity. To me, that's crucial, because if you don't do it, I feel like when you take them to these other places, they don't really truly understand it. And I think that was one of the best things for my kids, was to grow up amongst the weights.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
It's always a tough question. I think kind of like we recorded a quick video about how I always say if there was no elite FTS, there would be no underground strength gym, because I devoured every article. And we've spoken a lot about technology. I think that coaches and parents of all coaches, anybody who's involved with strength training, should read the articles more. And I don't know how far back all your articles could go on the website.
All the way.
All the way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you read, your creative flows better. Meaning I'm reading an article about football strength, wrestling strength, powerlifting. I start thinking, how can I implement it? Whereas if you're only consuming information through podcast or video, you're not allowing yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to take this piece and that piece and test it. So read more articles on the website and take notes while reading them, print them out, put your hands on them, and learn to kind of, pull from different philosophies. I think you're going to learn better and you can apply better.
I would add to that and say that I think that they should still write, even if it's their own blog, if it's just writing about what they just learned. Yes. Because a lot of us were writing about things as we were learning them. We weren't writing from an expert mentality. Now, we weren't writing over our heads. We were writing what we knew and what we understood. Yeah. Because if we speak about the large language models, you're going to be searched on those. This is where you got a vast advantage. And when it searches on those, it's going to pull every article you've ever done and the transcript from every podcast you've ever done and every video it does this now.
Yep.
And so if you're a new coach, what's it going to pull on you? Right? Because you have to compete with the other ones that have that. So if you're not feeding that algorithm, like we had to feed Google, right? Yes. We had to feed SEO, right?
I don't even know if Google was the main search engine back in the day. It may have been like Yahoo or something.
Yes. I think that's even more vital now.
Yeah.
Because I find myself searching that before I search Google.
Most writing today, Dave, I feel, from the younger coaches, now that you're saying that, is on Instagram or TikTok. Mm-hmm. They're not writing, like you said, whatever's available, Substack. When coaches tell me, hey, how do I get my word out there? I was like, you need to write articles for Elite. And I think you said it to me. I probably said it last time, but you said, Zach, you have written the most articles on Elite outside of myself and Jim. And I would write during my lunch or my prep or at night, and it helped me become a better coach by writing.
Think. It helps you process. And as you're writing, you're going to find blind spots.
Yes.
And then what do you do with the blind spot? You're going to go try to figure out and look at other stuff to be able to see how to fill.
You start to research.
To fill that spot.
I'm writing this, but it doesn't sound that great. I need to kind of clarify. Let me research something else. And so that's missing, the research piece. Also, best research is coming and training. So, I know Ohio has always been known as a hub of strength and conditioning. I know you have like the crew, but how much, and then you also, you did the 1 year you were partnered with Swiss. What's the people's opportunities to come here to learn and train? Is it less than what was once done?
They're more smaller group, so more intimate and more in depth.
Or is it lifters or coaches?
Both, but it's, when it's 20 hours over 2 days, it'd be like clinics and things that you do that are in small. There's a way bigger impact because it's way more in depth.
Yes.
And we've gravitated more towards that over the years because the outcome, the survey a year later and you look at what the results are, far superior to when you're speaking in front of 100 people.
You're right.
Because that 100 people and that, what do you get, hour 45 minutes, you lose.
Going deep enough.
Yeah. I mean, I was always taught if you're speaking in front of a group, you can't cover more than 3 things. And you're lucky if they're going to remember all 3.
That's good.
You know, so that's it. Now you have 2 days and it's hands-on, immersive and so forth. And a lot more things become sticky. They can feel it.
Immersion is the ticket.
Yeah.
I saw something that said, like, go get your ass kicked. And I looked at it like, if I'm a strength coach, let me come here and get my ass kicked. Let me train and really struggle, but learn so much from it. If I'm an athlete, stop only going to, the same sport club or competing in the same. Why don't you get in your car and compete in Pennsylvania or this state? Like, do something and get your butt kicked. That's where we learn.
Well, that's your definition of hard is based upon the hardest thing that you've ever done, right? So if we're talking about RPE in a general sense, what you think is a 10, if you're trained by somebody else, you might discover is actually a 6.
Big time.
Right?
Yes.
So, being around those different environments to be able to click that up is also important for your progression.
Your environment, I'll just close it out with this, is the most crucial thing. It was Dan John or John Welborn said kind of like the things that influence your like athletic success is going to be something like genetics, geography, and opportunity. So if I live in Dagestan, the geography and opportunity, I'm probably going to be a wrestler or a fighter. If I am lifting and, like Matt Brown, he's like, hey, I went to Westside Barbell, and I was like, what's this shithole? But everybody's lifting heavy. Hey, I squat, but so do these guys squat. Well, it's very different. Hey, I drive a car, but I'm hanging out with these NASCAR drivers. Quote unquote, same thing, done differently. So put yourself in geographical and opportunist places that elevate you. And that means you have to step away from the phone and the computer and do this. Get around. You got to go get your ass kicked.
See, that's one of those other intangibles that AI is not going to be able to replicate, right? So that's what goes back into the personality.
Can AI be my training partner? Can you squat with me? Can you bench with me? You cannot. You have to go into another group. And, the first kid I trained in my neighborhood, you were saying get in front of him. I said, he was a basketball player. And I said, if you want to be varsity, you got to go to the park to play pickup with the big guys, because it's like part basketball, part street fight. But then when you play with high school kids, it's going to be easy because you were in this place and position that challenged you. It was friggin' hard, but it catapulted you. Nobody can achieve anything great in the comfort zone. And so that's a very important reminder. And by the way, I stopped for a bit, Dave, like traveling and going to stuff because I felt bad. I'm leaving my kids for the weekend. My wife's got to take care of everything. But then I learned when I leave for a 2 or 3 day or 4 day, I come back a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better coach. So you need to sometimes get away from that normal environment to come back. And that's an important thing for coaches and athletes to do, is you have to have these times where you step away from normal environment. You are reshaped into something better when you come back.
Would you have bought that 20 years ago?
Well, 20 years ago, I would travel. 20 years, I told Nate, he was asking, he's like, when did you first meet Dave? I go, in person. Was it Rochester that we did that? You guys did the seminar? What year was it? I didn't even own a gym.
Yeah, way.
It was when I was invited to be on the Q&A. It was 20 years ago. Well, guess, all right, so what came back from that? I had been writing so many articles for you guys, and maybe you and Jim had a conversation and said, hey, we like this guy. Okay, so that completely changed the trajectory of my strength coach career. Learning was extremely powerful. Joe DeFranco speaking, Buddy Morris, Dr. Michael Hope, the dinner we had at Michael's house, the networking, that, I was so fired up to do that. And of course I could drive to it. And it's interesting when somebody will say, hey, I'm not going to come to Elite FTS. It's 45 minutes away from me. You're like, 45 minutes, bro, or 4 hours. And so I say, comfort is the enemy. Yeah, wake up early, drive, come here. That's the only way you're going to grow. You have to get out of your circle. Yes.
How can people find you?
Strong Life Podcast, and my website has tons of articles, ZachEven-Esh.com, articles, videos. Man, like you said, I've been writing since forever. Some of those old ones, I read them and I'm like, but when I come across them, I actually go back and re-edit. So lots of free stuff, and go on Elite FTS, look up all the old articles. I probably made a lot of mistakes in my writing. My thing.
No, but you can see the path.
You can see the path. My thing of importance here is to really emphasize the importance of what you do, Dave, because what you do, if people dive into it with Elite FTS, live, learn, pass on, you become better from that. You realize not to keep it to yourself, to share more. So, being around you was life-changing for me, you and Jim. So, people go to my website, whatever. People need to dig into what you do. You're going to do 3 podcasts today. To me, that's crazy, but it's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great seeing you again.
Great
and
seeing
we're
you.
done.
We're done.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.